Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 290 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where, at long last, the Lord of the Mark and I are met in the midst of battle.
Though all the podcast hosts of Mordor lay between us. Folks, pull up a bench in the common room and join us. I'm Shawn, the Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the Man of the West, whom few indeed dare to abide or look on his face in his hour of wrath, Alan Sisto.
You know, even when it's not my hour of wrath, that might just be good advice, Shawn. Folks,
face for radio.
That's right. Join us for a serious case of emotional whiplash as the eucatastrophe arrives in the last of our 3 episodes on the chapter The Battle of the Pelennor Fields, the 6th chapter in The Return of the King.
And folks, we know that some of you are hearing this podcast for the very first time, and to you, we bid a very warm welcome. Here at the Prancing Pony Podcast, we are reading, talking, speculating, and often joking our way through Middle-earth, a few pages at a time.
We take a deep dive into the lore, we explore how the story came to be, talk about our favorite themes, and a whole lot more.
But we do it all in a lighthearted and fun way, a bit like friends chatting at the pub. Mm-hmm. And we're glad you've joined us.
Indeed we are, and I'm sure you'll be glad you joined as well. But before we get to tonight's text and the eucatastrophe, let's see what's happening meanwhile elsewhere in Middle-earth. So today is March 15th, and most but not all of the action in Middle-earth is happening right here in and around Minas Tirith. The Witch King broke the gates of the city shortly after midnight. Man, that feels like a long time ago now.
Right.
In podcast time, the Rohirrim arrived at dawn. Theoden has died. Éowyn and Merry teamed up to kill the Witch King. The Battle of the Pelennor Fields takes place, and Aragorn shows up. It is a busy day.
It is, and it's also the tragic day that marks the end of the stewardship of Denethor.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to be looking at that in the next 2 weeks on the podcast, so we're not going to be talking about it here.
That's right.
Instead, we're actually going to be looking at a handful of other events that are happening, well, elsewhere in Middle-earth, because that's the name of the segment.
Good point. So as we know, Sauron's forces were attacking in other places, and 2 of those battles took place today, March 15th. The first is one for which there really is nothing to say. It's simply the second of 3 assaults on Lorien, and it's the second one that is defeated. But we also have an event that the Tale of Years calls the Battle Under the Trees, and that takes place in the woodland realm belonging to Thranduil. We read, "In the north also there had been war and evil. The realm of Thranduil was invaded, and there was long battle under the trees and great ruin of fire, but in the end Thranduil had the victory." 3 weeks later, on April 6th, Thranduil and Celeborn will meet in the middle of Mirkwood, renaming it Erin Lasgalen, the Wood of Green Leaves.
That's right. That is a good one. But, of course, many of us are going to have our thoughts with Frodo and Sam on this date. And what's going on with them at this time? Well, before dawn, Sam had rescued Frodo in the Tower of Cirith Ungol, and they'd made their way out, nearly being stopped by the Watchers and almost spotted by an arriving Nazgul. And then we read, "Day was coming again in the world outside, and far beyond the glooms of Mordor the sun was climbing over the eastern rim of Middle-earth. But here all was still dark as night. The mountains smoldered, and its fires went out. The glare faded from the cliffs. The easterly wind that had been blowing ever since they left Ithilien now seemed dead. Slowly and painfully they clambered down, groping, stumbling, scrambling among rock and briar and dead wood in the blind shadows, down and down until they could go no further. At length they stopped and sat side by side, their backs against a boulder. Both were sweating. "If Shagrat himself was to offer me a glass of water, I'd shake his hand," said Sam. "Don't say such things," said Frodo. "It only makes it worse."
I imagine it does. Later, after Frodo has discarded his orc mail and they continue making their way north, we read this. "Away to their left, southward against a sky that was turning gray, the peaks and high ridges of the great range began to appear dark and black, visible shapes. Light was growing behind them. Slowly it crept towards the north. There was battle far above in the high spaces of the air. The billowing clouds of Mordor were being driven back. Their edges, tattering as a wind out of the living world, came up and swept the fumes and smokes towards the dark land of their home. Under the lifting skirts of the dreary canopy, dim light leaked into Mordor like pale morning through the grimed window of a prison. "Look at it, Mr. Frodo," said Sam. "Look at it. The wind's changed. Something's happening. He's not having it all his own way. His darkness is breaking up out in the world there. I wish I could see what is going on. It was the morning of the 15th of March, and over the vale of Anduin, the sun was rising above the eastern shadow, and the southwest wind was blowing. Theoden lay dying on the Pelennor Fields.
And that's actually right before the passage that we read last week about Frodo and Sam seeing the black speck of the Witch King and learning that the Lord of the Ringwraiths had met his doom. Later tonight, Sam is going to see that beautiful white star in the sky, the one whose beauty smote his heart.
Oh.
But we're going to have to wait until next season to get to that.
Yes, we will.
For now, though, before we get into the text of this chapter, we get to hang out with Brett one more time.
For the last couple of weeks, we've been joined by Dr. Brett Devereaux, ancient and military historian and author of A Collection of Unmitigated Pedantry. And one more time this season, at least, we're happy to have him join us again. Brett, welcome back.
Great to be back.
Great to talk to you again, Brett. And I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into the questions. Now, at the point we're now at in the battle, we start to see a huge swing of morale here, right? We see here in the text, the hosts of Mordor were enheartened and filled with a new lust and fury, while hope died in Éomer's heart. Now, obviously, that's not going well for our heroes, and Éomer chooses to make a last stand, to fight there on foot till all fell, and do deeds of song, though no man should be left in the West. It's kind of that Beowulfian, that fight to the death. You're not going to survive, but you're going to do it anyway. Now then, after Aragorn reveals his standard, then suddenly it turns, right? Then we see that the mirth of the Rohirrim was a torrent of laughter. And then it's the hosts of Mordor were seized with bewilderment, and a black dread fell on them. So it's a very clear swing of morale here. We've touched more than once on the importance of morale in battle, but this really is a huge swing. Talk to us a little bit about the significance of this morale swing for both sides.
Right. So it's important to remember that people in a battle, right, are suspended in this sort of thin balance between courage and terror. And you have sort of crowd and, frankly, mob dynamics that go along as well. And so shifts in morale can be very sudden, and they can be very impactful. I mean, in part because, right, if you see two guys near you running away, you have to make a split-second judgment. You are already very frightened. If you're the last guy to run away, you're not going to get away. So you need to make that decision sort of immediately. And so this kind of morale can matter quite a bit. And of course, everyone is working with very imperfect information. You can't see very much. You can't know what's going on here. And so people react very strongly to what they can observe. I'm reminded of I'm going to use two ancient Greek battles here. The Battle of Delium. The Athenians were actually winning on the right side of the army when a fairly small detachment of Theban cavalry comes up. And the Athenians conclude that this is a whole new army coming into the battlefield and just panic and bail.
Oh, no.
And the army immediately collapses. And the Athenians end up losing what was a very winnable battle against Thebes.
Our bad.
And it's not because like all of the Athenians were dummy wummies. Famously, actually, Socrates is in this battle as quite an old man, but that's how Greek warfare works. You keep fighting as a hoplite well into old age. So Socrates has to hightail it off the battlefield. Of course, as he tells it via Plato, right? He's like gathered a clump of guys and is moving off in good order. I'm sure, yeah. Whatever.
Of course, yeah.
But that kind of thing. The other thing that this whole sequence puts me in mind of, there is a passage in Thucydides' history of the Peloponnesian War where the Athenians have attacked Syracuse, which is on Sicily. And in the end, their invasion is going to be decided by a naval battle in the great harbor of Syracuse. And the Athenian army, which has been besieging Syracuse, is on land watching it. And Thucydides gives this incredibly moving description of the shifts in the army. And he says, people reacted depending on where they looked. So, one man looked this way and, wailed that we're defeated. And another man looked that way and wailed, we conquer. And there, this sort of swirling of emotions The army shouts encouragements, cries out in despair, and so on. In the end, the Athenians lose. The result is catastrophic for the army. Almost none of these men will live to see Athens ever again. And so, you can kind of feel, I think, that's a big element in battle. And so, what we see here is the fleet comes up, and this is something everyone can see.
Yeah.
It is an indicator everyone can see. The fleet also means a lot. I mean, remember that, especially for the commanders, they understand if the enemy's fleet is coming up, then that means that southern Gondor is gone. And then in some ways, right, the pick-me-up for the orcs of seeing the fleet come in turns into immediate crushing despair that the fleet is full of their enemies. And it produces that sort of sudden shift and sudden panic, as we see, and their army falls apart. I'm not surprised. The arrival of a second enemy force on a hard-fought battlefield almost always results in the enemy falling apart.
Yeah.
The emotional strain is too great. And of course, Aragorn is making excellent use of banners as signaling.
Yes.
A clear signal of who's on this ship. And
right. He could have done that earlier, by the way. He could have done that earlier and not given them that initial hope, but that's all right. It's a really cool trick. He's just pranked. He
was going for like that M. Night Shyamalan twist, just that last minute.
One of the little known traits of the House of Isildur is dramatic timing.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's quite true.
They're so good at it.
Well, speaking of Aragorn coming up the Anduin with those ships, we don't often spend time here beating up the films, and we're not necessarily trying to do that here even, but Jackson's decision to use the army of the dead kind of crawling all over Minas Tirith instead of actual Gondorian reinforcements from the southern fiefdoms was a very significant departure from the books. Talk to us a little bit about why it's so important that it's the men that are actually doing this fighting and not some super weapon of the dead.
Yeah, so, first, just the way the army of the dead is described as fighting wouldn't actually work really well in this context. Like, Legolas is legit uncertain if they can actually hurt anyone.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't even know if their weapons work. Everybody just ran away from us.
Yeah.
And that was fantastic.
Yeah.
So if you brought them onto this field, like, everyone would run away. Éomer, his guys, the orcs, the garrison, everyone, right? Like, it is a concern when Aragorn is moving this army that he's like, you guys follow back at a distance, because only like Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, and the Dunedain can actually stand to be near the army of the dead.
Right.
The sort of supernatural terror that they create. But I also think that it's really unfortunate in the way that it plays into this sort of Hollywood trope where battles are represented as this sort of rock, paper, scissors, often between combat systems. Like, I see that, you have played, it's like an episode of like Yu-Gi-Oh! You've played this card. Well, I'm going to play this card that counters it. I think Tolkien has a better sense that these battles are more about spirit and morale, that the moral dimension, the decision to fight is more important. This is the Tolkien who has both Gandalf and Aragorn look at Boromir's death and conclude that he won, right? Gandalf sighs relief. He escaped. And Aragorn is, few have gained such a victory, I think is his phrasing. And so that these are the men of Gondor, the sort of the valor of Gondor matters in that context, because like fundamentally a lot of the narrative in The Lord of the Rings is about people's decision to fight. It is, right, we talked in previous episodes about the despair of the defenders and the efforts to kindle their desire to resist. We have Éomer's decision not to give up when all seems lost, but to sort of go beast mode instead.
Beast mode.
And obviously Theoden's decision to even show up here at all is a fraught one. And so there's all of these decisions. And indeed, this is Gandalf's core purpose, is to sort of kindle the fires of hope in men. And this is that coming to fruition. Here is a whole bunch of guys who really didn't need to be here, who, because of Aragorn's leadership, are showing up in a battle-turning way. And I think that that's a sort of a different message than, Aragorn sort of playing rock, paper, scissors, dynamite, where he deploys the Middle-earth version of a nuke at the end of the battle to win because he just has the better weapon system.
Right. Well, that's interesting. And it seems like it would create a better state of Gondor after the fact, wouldn't it? Because you've got a whole bunch of people who have, they've followed Aragorn into this battle. He has inspired these people, and they will follow him as their king too in peacetime. So it seems like it sort of creates the conditions for a more cohesive Gondor after the battle, I think.
It is an exercise in the construction of royal legitimacy.
Wow, I love it.
That's a great way to put it.
See?
Yes.
That's why we've got you here, Brent.
That's why we bring on the PhD.
This is why I get paid the big bucks, is because I can say it. I can translate into academic.
Ooh.
Yeah,
which is very important.
Beautifully done.
Absolutely.
Well, and then speaking of inspiring leaders or formidable leaders, we read that Aragorn and Éomer and Prince Imrahil were all unscathed, for such was their fortune and the skill and might of their arms, and few indeed had dared to abide them or look on their faces in the hour of their wrath. Were any human battlefield leaders really that successful? Were there really people like this who would just have this countenance on the battlefield? Was it luck? The famous generals that we know about, were they just lucky, or were they really so good that foes just didn't want to get near them? Can you talk to us about any real life stories of people who were seemingly untouchable like this in combat?
See, of course, my mind goes the other direction of generals that were extremely touchable in combat.
Those are good stories too. We're fine.
I mean, Alexander the Great gets banged up something fierce. He takes a hit to the chest during one of his sieges. He very nearly gets the back of his head taken off in his very first in his invasion of the Persian Empire. His father lost an eye. One of his generals is also Antigonus Monophthalmus. Monophthalmus means the one-eyed, and you can figure out how that happened. It's certainly not always true. I think at the same time, when you're thinking about your sort of high aristocratic leaders, these guys, obviously, they're going to have the best training. They're also going to have the best armor. And so, I mean, absolutely, that we see that, you'll read about, Duke so-and-so, and you realize that this guy has probably been in a dozen or more major or minor engagements and has managed not to end up dead. I think in terms of, this sort of, few had dared to abide them, we can think, in part, obviously, there is a supernatural element here. Certainly to Aragorn and Imrahil, like both of whom seem to have an almost supernatural ability to influence the psychology of people around them.
Yes.
We talked about sort of Imrahil like raising the spirits of the defenders, and Gimli makes a comment that the only thing that keeps him in line around the army of the dead is Aragorn's will.
Just his pure will alone. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think we're being signaled here that Éomer is a man of that sort, and therefore a worthy king for Rohan.
Yeah.
Nice.
But I think also you want to think about it on a battlefield. When you're looking at your opponent, you're trying to sort of size him up, and you're like, is this someone I want to be fighting? And on the one hand, if it's a peasant with a pitchfork, you're going to have a different response than if you look and you see someone in the very best armor with the very best kit that is all very fancy, and you're like, that guy could definitely afford a fencing instructor. He's decked out in armor that probably makes him very resistant to the weapons I'm carrying. And you're like, maybe no.
I need to level up first.
Yeah, maybe I'm not. And that sort of thing resounds in our sources for the ancient and medieval worlds. Jumping to Homer, Homer repeatedly riffs on this idea of the terrifying glint of bronze. That the bronze itself was scary. The famous example, Hector is up on the walls, and his wife brings Hector's little baby boy, Astynix, up. And Astynix sees Hector with his helmet and starts crying because the helmet is scary. Because it's this big, shiny bronze helmet. And I think that speaks to sort of Homer's idea that like this stuff is terrifying. And indeed, our sources talk about like looking across the field. Greek soldiers polished the bronze facings of their shields. Their shields had a foil-thin layer of bronze on the front of it, just a fraction of a millimeter. But they would polish this to a mirror shine because you're looking across and you see the enemy and the glints on all of their shields.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh, man, those guys are scary. They have some great equipment. They've taken care of it. They look like the sort of dudes that are going to wreck my stuff, so to speak. Keep this G-rated.
Thank you for remembering the family-friendly PPP.
And so I think that could be a factor as well, and that's sort of playing into also, right? Like all of these things are playing together. So yeah, if you're some orc on the battlefield and Imrahil shows up in his gleaming armor, and then the psychological force around this sort of exceptional individual, you're like,
not that guy.
Yeah, I'm gonna go after the peasant with the pitchfork for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Steve, you have at him.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. You take that guy, I'll get this guy.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And certainly, I mean, it's one of the things in the medieval sources, especially as the gap in armored protection between the elite and the common soldier widens with really expensive full mail covering, and then you're supplementing it with plate, and the stuff isn't cheap. It really does seem in some cases like we get reports when elite nobles die in battle, because that was kind of unusual. That even if you lost the battle, I mean, chances are, like, noble might be captured. He's probably not dead. Just because there's not a lot that can hurt him on this battlefield, short of wrestling him to the ground. And he's also more valuable alive than dead for ransom. And so instances like the Battle of Courtrai, for instance, famously the Battle of the Golden Spurs, where thousands of French knights are slain by Flemish burghers, who then, the battle gets its name because they take all of their golden spurs and hang them up in the local church as a sort of, look, we won.
Oh, wow. Wow, cool.
But precisely what makes this a sort of shocking battle reported substantially in the sources is that to have that many elites, the sort of flower of French chivalry, snipped so hard is like, that's shocking. Men like that fight all the time. They don't die.
Right. Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, I find the idea that obviously we're being told something about these characters, but this is also something of the nature of their position in this social hierarchy.
Excellent.
I like the idea that dying is for peasants.
That's right. If there's a lesson we've ever learned in anything, Sean, it's
dying is for the poor.
Well, and then of course they are super angry when, firearms begin to alter that equation, and suddenly dying is for everybody.
That's right. That is right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Brett, for joining us and talking to us these last few episodes. It's been a lot of fun to talk to you about this, and you've just shed a ton of light on this whole battle for us. So thank you. We've really enjoyed having you.
Thanks for having me. This has been great. I need to find some sort of excuse to come back.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know. We're going to be storming the Black Gate at some point, right?
Yes, we will. That's later this season. Well, just like with the Siege of Gondor, I know our listeners have also really enjoyed having your expertise and insight into this chapter. And like you said, we are storming the castle eventually, so any excuse to have you back on. But in the meantime, thanks again, and you're always welcome here at the Prancing Pony Podcast.
Well, with that, let's go ahead and get back into the last part of the chapter.
Man, sitting down with Brett over these last 3 episodes has been a real privilege. I've learned a lot, and I really hope we can have him back on again soon.
Absolutely. I can't wait to hear him again. And in the meantime, I'm going to be checking out his blog frequently for more good stuff.
Yeah.
But for now, I think it is time for us to get to the last part of this chapter. And Alan, you're going to start us off.
But do we have to, Shawn? Maybe we go really slow and you'll be here for another month. What do you think?
Right. We can try. Let's
All right.
see how far we can stretch this out.
Okay. So before I read, we last left the battle there at the Pelennor Fields as their last hope was leaving the Rohirrim. And we're going to now find out why that last hope is leaving them. For Anduin, from the bend at the Harlond, so flowed that from the city men could look down it lengthwise for some leagues, and the far-sighted could see any ships that approached. And looking thither, they cried in dismay, for black against the glittering stream they beheld a fleet borne up on the wind, dromons and ships of great draught with many oars, and with black sails bellying in the breeze. "The corsairs of Umbar!" men shouted. "The corsairs of Umbar! Look, the corsairs of Umbar are coming! So Belfalas is taken, and the Aethir, and Lebanon is gone. The corsairs are upon us! It is the last stroke of doom!" And some without order, for none could be found to command them in the city, ran to the bells and told the alarm, and some blew the trumpets sounding the retreat. "Back to the walls!" they cried. "Back to the walls! Come back to the city before all are overwhelmed!" But the wind that sped the ships blew all their clamor away. The Rohirrim indeed had no need of news or alarm. All too well they could see for themselves the black sails. For Éomer was now scarcely a mile from the Harlond, and a great press of his first foes was between him and the haven there, while new foes came swirling behind, cutting him off from the prince. Now he looked to the river, and hope died in his heart, and the wind that he had blessed he now called accursed. But the hosts of Mordor were enheartened, and filled with a new lust and fury, they came yelling to the onset.
Well, this doesn't seem good.
No. This is bad news for everybody, really. Yeah.
All right. So when we last left the battle, the watchmen in the city were looking south down the Anduin, and there they saw afar a new sight of fear, and their last hope left them. That was the passage we ended with last time. And now we learn why their last hope left them.
Now, first, just a bit of explanation geography-wise. The way the river coursed after the bend at Harlond is what gave the watchmen the ability to see straight down the river. If you remember, the Anduin lies to the east of the city, with the ruins of Osgiliath sort of to the northeast on both sides of the river.
That's right. But then as it approaches the Éomer Arnin, the river bends west towards the ports and the quays at Harlond.
Right.
And then after that, it bends back down to the south for quite some time, actually, before curving west through Lebennin, and then it goes by Pelargir on the way to the Bay of Belfalas.
Right. Now, as a result of this southerly-looking straight-shot look down the river, there is great visibility for these upcoming ships. And ships is what they see, black against the stream. They see dromons and ships of great draft.
Right. Now, a dromond, or dromon in Greek, was a type of galley. Now, I guess I should probably explain that a galley is a ship that's propelled mainly by oars and that has a long, slender hull and a shallow draft.
Right.
The dromon was a particular type of galley used by the Byzantine Empire, and it usually had a single large square sail.
Right. Now, because those have shallow drafts, they are different from the ships of great draft, which unfortunately Tolkien doesn't describe any further. You just have the shallow draft ships and these big great draft ships.
And these dromons have their black sails bellying in the wind. In other words, they're, like the wind is pushing them out. They're sticking out like a belly, full.
Like our bellies. Yeah,
like
exactly.
My belly, certainly, yeah.
Sadly, mine too, my friend. So understandably, the men believe that these are the Corsairs of Umbar come to finish the job. If they're here on the Anduin, though, that means that all those southern parts of Gondor along the river are gone, defeated. And that eliminates the possibility of reinforcements.
Right. So for them, this truly is the last stroke of doom. And I mean, this is it. Nobody's coming to help them.
No.
And so some, without leadership to stop them from making bad choices.
Denethor's abandoned his role.
Right. Right. So some are just kind of, they're kind of panicking. They're sounding alarms. They're sounding a general retreat.
Yep, absolutely. Now, thankfully, the wind blows those sounds away. Retreat, as it turns out, would actually not be the best option right now.
No, it would not. But then, if we go back out to the battlefield, even without hearing any of these sounds of alarm that are going on in the city, Éomer and his men are well aware of what's happening right now. They're actually just a mile from the ports, and they can actually see these black sails coming themselves. That's
right. But Éomer's forces are surrounded, right? We get a press of his first foes that are in front of him, but now he's got new enemies flanking him. That's that exploitation force we talked about last week, the Variogs, the Southrons, and the Easterlings that we talked about. So the arrival of even more enemies pushes him right over the edge. We get this just heart-wrenching statement, hope died in his heart.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's
like
a gut punch.
It is.
Hope
absolutely
died in his heart. And he curses the wind. He literally curses the wind. The wind he had blessed, he now curses. While the armies of Mordor, of course, are thrilled about this.
Oh, yeah.
They see what they think is their total and complete victory coming up the river. Oh, here are our reinforcements.
Right. Where are yours? Oh, you have none. Ha ha. Right. We are going to win now. Now, before we move to the next short section, let's talk a little bit about these black sails, as there are at least two other ancient legends that Hammond and Skull point us to that reference black sails as harbingers of bad news or doom. And the first comes from Greek mythology. King Aegeus had told his son, who may also have been Poseidon's son, but that's a whole other story, Theseus, to fly a white sail when he came back to Athens if he had defeated the Minotaur, and to have the crew raise a black sail if Theseus had been killed. Well, Theseus forgot, and that's also another story.
He had a hard week on Crete, man.
He had a very hard week on Crete. Let's just
give him a break.
So he forgot and was sailing with the black sails, and Aegeus, in his grief, threw himself from the cliffs into the Aegean, giving the sea its name and Athens a new king.
Yeah, who thankfully was on the boat and alive.
Yes, that's right. Not dead. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great callback. I have always thought of that story when I read this part of the chapter. This other one is a new one to me, though. I mean, I'm somewhat familiar with the Arthurian legend of Tristan and Isolde, or Tristan and Isolde. I mean, like, I know the names and maybe broad strokes of the story, but I did
hard not to know the names because every woman in the story is named Isolde.
That is true, yeah. but I only knew broad strokes of the story.
Yeah.
And so there's a reference here too. So Tristan and Isolde are lovers, despite the fact that Isolde is married to Tristan's uncle, King Mark.
Right.
Now they part, and Tristan ends up marrying another woman named Isolde, because apparently everybody is named Isolde here. Isolde of the White Hands.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know. Maybe he just really likes the name.
Yeah.
Like, I knew a woman named Isolde. Yeah, it's
I wrote a song. It would be nice if I didn't have to come up with a new rhyme.
I've already got the
that.
tattoo. I don't have to get it removed. So yeah, he marries another Isolde of the White Hands. Now, in one version of the tale, Tristan is wounded and dying, and he sends for the original Isolde of Ireland, because apparently she's the only person who can heal him.
Right.
The ship that he sends to go and get her is supposed to come back with white sails if it's coming back with Isolde on it, and black sails if she's decided not to come. As it turns out, the first Isolde of Ireland, she does agree to go, and the ship is in fact sailing with white sails when it comes back, but Tristan is so sick that he can't see it. And so Isolde number 2, Isolde of the White Hands, who was understandably jealous, his wife, who was understandably jealous of his ex-girlfriend who has the same name as her coming to heal him, apparently.
Yeah.
She actually lies to him about the color of the sails, says they're black, and Tristan dies of grief.
I love that version. That's so terribly just like, I'm sorry, honey, the sails are black. Oh,
I mean,
end of story.
Well, I guess you know how he felt about you. I mean,
yeah,
geez.
I guess so.
Poor
black
thing.
Sails, bad. That's what we've got on that.
Very bad.
Now, we will have more in the P5. We have a very interesting story, a little too long to go into here. The story of Tal Elmar, which we find near the very, very end of Peoples of Middle-earth. Fantastic story. And it's the kind of thing that's like a big old sidebar in and of itself, but it would really take us off the point here. So we'll cover that in the P5. Definitely come and listen to that. Now, folks, before we get back to the text and Éomer's Beowulf moment, we want to make sure you know that even after you've listened to the episode, there is a lot more talk going on at the Prancing Pony podcast.
There really is. The PPP has an amazing listener community. They're always coming up with great questions and discussions across all of our social media spaces. You're going to want to check out our common room on Facebook, our dedicated subreddit, Twitter, and more.
On Facebook, just look for the Prancing Pony podcast, follow the page to get the news, but be sure to join the group for some great discussion.
Or if you prefer Reddit, find us there at r/prancingponypod. And on Twitter and Instagram, we're simply at Prancing Pony Pod.
And finally, my all-new daily podcast, Today's Tolkien Times, should have launched by now. It's a short-form podcast available wherever you get your podcast, also available in video form somewhere. I'm still deciding exactly where, but each day is going to feature something different, from Mailbag Monday to Word Nerd Wednesday to Silmarillion Saturday. So join me on this new adventure. Visit TolkienTimes.com and follow at Tolkien Times on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And you can find me on Facebook there at Today's Tolkien Times. Now, Shawn, since you've been gone, that's a song, right?
It is. Yeah.
Can you sing it for me?
Sing it, though.
No? Okay. Sorry. I've been chatting with each of the previous co-hosts about the book that you and I have been working on diligently and longer than we thought.
Hopefully nobody will complain about it being longer than we thought it would be.
No, but they'll complain if it takes longer to come out than we told them it would.
That's the challenge right now.
That is. Still, it is nice to be getting close to finishing up the manuscript, though by the time you hear this, folks, it should be turned in.
Absolutely. And I'm so looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to it coming out this year.
Yeah.
So, folks, Why We Love Middle-earth, that's the title of the book. It releases in September of this year. Now, that's 2023 for those of you listening in the future. We're working really hard to make it a great resource for both new and longtime readers of Tolkien.
Yeah, when we learned about the Rings of Power coming out, we knew that just like when the Jackson films came out, there were going to be a brand new group of viewers who were going to want to learn more about the world of Middle-earth and the fandom. So you and I have been writing what we hope is going to be a guidebook for many folks who are diving into Middle-earth for the very first time, but at the same time, making sure that veteran readers are also welcomed as they look for more information on a specific aspect of Tolkien's works or on the fandom.
Yeah, the chapters serve as introductions to different books in the Legendarium, different topics of study or fan interests. The whole idea is to draw readers deeper into Middle-earth and into this amazing Tolkien community as they read along with us. We're going to be talking a lot about the books, but we're also going to spend some time talking about adaptations, online communities, fan gatherings, Tolkien's languages, and more.
And of course, we're working to make sure the book mirrors the experience of listening to the podcast as much as it's possible to do in written form. A bunch of asides and digressions and footnotes, commentary in each of our two voices, and plenty of pop culture references and dad jokes. Pre-orders are available now, so check out our socials and especially our website, theprancingponypodcast.com, for more information and to pre-order. For now, though, it's time to get back to the text. Shawn, would you pick up where I left off?
I will. Stern now was Éomer's mood, and his mind clear again. He let blow the horns to rally all men to his banner that could come thither, for he thought to make a great shield wall at the last, and stand and fight there on foot till all fell, and do deeds of song on the fields of Pelennor, though no man should be left in the west to remember the last king of the Mark. So he rode to a green hillock and there set his banner, and the white horse ran rippling in the wind. Out of doubt, out of dark, to the day's rising, I came singing in the sun, sword unsheathing. To hope's end I rode, and to heart's breaking. Now for wrath, now for ruin, and a red nightfall. These staves he spoke, yet he laughed as he said them, for once more lust of battle was on him, and he was still unscathed, and he was young, and he was king, the lord of a fell people. And lo, even as he laughed at despair, he looked out again on the black ships, and he lifted up his sword to defy them.
That's right, he did. Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Yep.
Éomer's moment right here. Éomer becomes determined, right? I mean, when we last left him, he was angry, but it was fury. It was that untethered sort of loss of all rational control after that seeing his sister.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. The Fey mood. But now he can reason again and think.
Yeah, and the first thing he does is what any thinking man would do here, and that's rally his men to his banner.
Yeah.
And he's thinking strategically here. They're going to do what they do. They're going to form a shield wall, and they're going to fight until the end.
What else could they do, right? I mean, I don't think retreat here, if you're being flanked by three sides, is really an option. So, yeah, do the thing you can do. Find the slight little bit of high ground that you can on this hillock, get a shield wall going, and do your thing. But here's the thing, even if it is the only thing they could do, it is so Rohirric. It is Anglo-Saxon, so northern ethos right there. I love it.
It's totally Beowulf. I mean, do deeds of song, though no man be left. I mean, that heroic ethos, that northern ethos is really echoed throughout this bit of text here.
Yeah.
So yeah, he rides to this hillock, this small hill. And like you said, he's just kind of getting whatever tactical advantage he has on the battlefield here.
Yeah.
Plants his banner here. We've talked with Brett about, the importance of the banner.
Yes.
And he does this. And then, we see this really beautiful moment, knowing now what the banner signifies to the army. This image of the banner flapping in the wind, the horse running in the wind, figuratively speaking. It's beautiful. Hey, Rohan is still here. We're still alive. We're still in this moment. It's lovely.
Ran rippling. It's just a little bit of alliterative stuff, but it flows so nicely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely beautiful. And we get this song of his, this very, very brief, well, he doesn't sing it, he speaks it, but it's like a prologue to a lament, right? I mean, he's ridden to the very breaking of his heart, right? The death of Theoden, essentially his father, his adoptive father, and his sister Éowyn, totally unexpected. And now to the end of his hope, right? His hope died in his heart just a moment ago. And so there's only death in his future. There's wrath, ruin, and this red nightfall.
Absolutely. And that's what's so Beowulf about this moment. It's
Isn't it?
He expects nothing except death. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
But he is going to fight.
Yes.
And that is going to be enough. And it's remarkable to think about how everything has changed for Éomer in one day.
Yeah, one day.
He rode to this battle not knowing what could happen.
No.
As far as he knew, his sister was still safely at home.
Right.
His uncle was still king. Uncle, but father,
Yeah.
We know this. And who knew what the battle would hold for him. But yeah, like you said, this is the end of the line for him, as far as he knows.
Absolutely.
And this has all happened in the space of a day. And it's still early in the day.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
Yeah. It's maybe midday at this point, if that.
In a morning, maybe in the first few hours of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, literally everything has changed for Éomer. And yet he does not weep as he speaks these lines. In fact, not only is he not stoic about it, he's laughing.
Yes.
He is laughing as he says this.
Which, again, feels just very Beowulfian. I mean, it's just fantastic. Yeah.
You know what else it makes me think of? It thinks of Ragnar Lothbrok, right? Remember Tom Shippey, Laughing Shall I Die, was the name of that book. And that's that was the quote, Ragnar Lothbrok of the famous from the Viking series, but a real historical figure.
Right.
Was, I think, said to be like among his last words, wasn't it? Laughing Shall I Die.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of where Éomer is here. This is the end for him, but he's going to laugh. And why, I mean, why not laugh?
Why not?
He's got the battle lust again. He's not been hurt.
No, he's in one piece, and he knows he's a really good fighter.
He knows he's a good fighter. That's absolutely right. He's still got his youth. He's still got his vigor, and he is now the king of a fell people, a very dangerous people.
Very dangerous indeed.
Absolutely. Sure.
Yeah.
Laugh about it. Again, I feel like a broken record, but it's so Beowulf. It's so...
Come and get me, orcs. Yeah. Come and get me, Southerns.
Come at me, bro. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he does. He raises his sword in defiance of the arrival of the ships, and it is this kind of like, come at me moment. Even if he dies, this is an amazing act of heroism.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
But what does happen?
Oh, it's even more awesome than just going out fighting, isn't it? All right.
It is.
And then wonder took him, and a great joy, and he cast his sword up in the sunlight and sang as he caught it. And all eyes followed his gaze, and behold, upon the foremost ship a great standard broke, and the wind displayed it as she turned towards the Harland. There flowered a white tree, and that was for Gondor. But 7 stars were about it, and a high crown above it, the signs of Elendil that no lord had borne for years beyond count. And the stars flamed in the sunlight, for they were wrought of gems by Arwen, daughter of Elrond. And the crown was bright in the morning, for it was wrought of mithril and gold. Thus came Aragorn, son of Arathorn, Elessar, Isildur's heir, out of the paths of the dead, borne upon a wind from the sea to the kingdom of Gondor. And the mirth of the Rohirrim was a torrent of laughter and a flashing of swords. And the joy and wonder of the city was a music of trumpets and a ringing of bells. But the hosts of Mordor were seized with bewilderment, and a great wizardry it seemed to them that their own ships should be filled with their foes. And a black dread fell on them, knowing that the tides of fate had turned against them, and their doom was at hand. East rode the knights of Dol Amroth, driving the enemy before them, trollmen and variogs and orcs that hated the sunlight. South strode Éomer, and men fled before his face, and they were caught between the hammer and the anvil. For now men leaped from the ships to the quays of the Harland and swept north like a storm. There came Legolas, and Gimli wielding his axe, and Halbarad with the standard, and Elladan and Elrohir with stars on their brow, and the dour-handed Dunedain, rangers of the north, leading a great valor of the folk of Lebanon and Lamadon and the fiefs of the south. But before all went Aragorn with the flame of the west, Anduril, like a new fire kindled, Narsil, reforged as deadly as of old, and upon his brow was the star of Elendil.
Oh, man. Man.
Oh, I get chills.
Awesome. Amazing. Wonderful reading.
Thank you.
Wonderful moment.
Oh, such a moment.
I've just got goosebumps everywhere.
The turn. This is
the turn. This is like the pan of the camera to reveal John Cleese sitting at the news desk saying, and now for something completely different.
I love that. It absolutely works. It really, really does. This is just amazing.
This is not what anyone expected. And I love Éomer's response to this. We'll get to that in a minute.
Throws his sword up in the moment. Man, it's great.
Oh, I love it. But all right, before we get to that.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to talk about, you said this is the turn. This is probably the best example of one of Tolkien's most famous literary devices, the literary device that Tolkien himself coined, the word we use for this concept on fairy stories. And we talked about this. I mean, we talked about it for the first time more than 7 years ago. This is that sudden, joyous turn, that sudden and miraculous grace, never to be counted on to recur.
That is absolutely right. The thing that gives to child or man that hears it when the turn comes, a catch of the breath, a beat and lifting of the heart, near to or indeed accompanied by tears. It's the eucatastrophe.
It absolutely is. Tolkien's own word for this concept. He used the device so effectively many times in the book. And there are many eucatastrophes, and there are quite a few big ones, but this is the one that, to me, I don't know, this feels like the exemplary one, even more so than, than later on, like say with Gollum and the Ring. This just feels like the exemplary eucatastrophe, doesn't it?
It does. It always has. Like when we read that 7 years ago, it's hard to believe.
I know, right?
I remember thinking like, this is the moment. This is the one that gives me that catch. This is the one that almost always brings tears to my eyes. Yeah. And it's because this is the one that is so gloriously unexpected.
Yeah. And it's wonderful because it's as unexpected for the characters as it is for us, isn't it? I mean, and we see it. Our first glimpse of this, our first experience of it is through Éomer's eyes.
Yes.
A moment ago, he was ready to fight until his death, just doing deeds of song, even though there might not be anybody alive to sing them.
Yeah. Let alone listen to them. Yeah.
Right. He's just lifted his sword up in defiance of the black-sailed ships, and then joy and wonder. And he throws his sword up in the air. This is that turn. This is that catch of the breath, the beat and lifting of the heart. It is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's a textbook eucatastrophe. This is it.
And it sure is. And what is it that makes him throw it in the air? He sees the standard, right? He sees this flag. So he sees it, and we see him celebrating before we as the reader see it. It's really glorious to experience this through his eyes. So he sees that flag being displayed on the very first ship in the line. And as it makes its turn towards the docks, the wind catches it. And that's when we as the reader get to finally see the details of this flag.
That's right. And so what do we see? Well, we see a white tree for Gondor, right? Okay, yeah, the white tree. That's the emblem of Gondor. But this one's different. This one's actually got 7 stars around it and a high crown above it. These are not the signs of Gondor under the stewards. These are signs of Elendil that can only be displayed by an heir of that line.
And think about it, folks. It has been nearly 1,000 years since the last king, Éomer, disappeared in Minas Morgul. It's been a while. Nobody alive.
It's been a minute, for sure. Yeah.
Nobody alive has any memory, even ancestral, right? I mean, nobody saw, my grandfather once saw this. No, it's been 1,000 years, people.
1,000 years. This is like Battle of Hastings.
Yeah,
to us.
Exactly. Oh, but the details of this flag, they are gorgeous, right? I mean, the stars made out of gems woven into the standard by Arwen herself, and the crown is made of mithril and gold into the flag. It's gorgeous.
Wow. I mean, props to her sewing ability.
Seriously. She didn't have a sewing machine or a team of seamstresses. She just did it herself.
I mean, I don't know how to do any of this, but I assume it's got to be hard to work with mithril.
Yeah.
I mean, that's awesome.
That's pretty amazing stuff.
And, it's important to remember that this isn't on the sail. This isn't a new sail with the imagery of Elendil draped over the old black sail. This isn't Aragorn playing some trick and surprise, it's actually Elendil.
That's right. Ha you thought it was the orcs. No, it's me.
I mean, yes, the livery of Elendil is black, and so it is the same color as the sail. But what this actually is this is actually a flag being revealed in addition to the black sails.
That's right. And I love the way Hammond and Skull put it, so I'm just going to quote them. They say, thus the sign of hope to the people of Gondor is the same color as the black sails they had seen as a sign of evil. Wow.
Man, and that brings me right back to that Tal Elmar story. Which
I know. I can't wait to get into that.
I feel bad bringing it up because we don't really have time to get into it here. But I mean,
it's too long.
It's there in Peoples of Middle-earth for people to read, and we will be talking about it in the P5. So
we will.
It's exactly this moment, isn't it?
It is. It is. Yeah,
similar.
The whole black sails. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
But now that the flag has been revealed, we get the full scope of the catastrophe. Yeah. Thus came Aragorn. And very, very briefly, just a touch, we get a little bit of that same parataxis that we saw with the charge of the Rohirrim, and the mirth and the joy. It's brief, right. But it's such a beautiful bit of prose.
It is, yeah. And this is the turning of the tide.
Yeah.
The tables are turned, really, on the forces of Mordor.
That's true. Yeah.
Who moments ago saw their victory as inevitable. And now they're shocked, they're surprised, they're filled with dread. And we get this wonderful line about the tides of fate turning on them.
Love
and
that.
They're doom. They're doom
it.
At hand.
Yeah, right now, right here. And now we see the practical impact of the arrival of Aragorn, right? I mean, first Imrahil and his knights are driving that reserve force that we just saw. They're driving them eastward.
That's right. And then from the north, they're heading south.
Right.
Éomer and his men are coming. And now the enemy is truly surrounded as the boat's empty.
That's right. And we get a whole listing of who's here. Legolas and Gimli, Halbarad, the standard bearer, and the Rangers of the North, Elladan and Elrohir, the sons of Elrond, whole bunch more.
Yep. And a force of men from the southern fiefdoms.
Right, right.
So this is not just like the heroes. This is like, the rank and file guys are here too, from Benjen, from Lamadon, and other places. And of course, leading them all, wielding Anduril and wearing the Star of Elendil, is Aragorn himself.
Oh, man.
And before we move on, I have to say, no dead people.
No Army of the Dead here. That is correct.
But anyway.
That's a very, very, very important point.
It is.
Now, I want to do a brief sidebar, maybe not so brief, on the Star of Elendil that he's wearing. It's also known as the Elendilmir. We have talked about it before, and for some reason I thought, it wasn't that long ago, but the last time we actually talked about it on the show was 4 years ago in the middle of season 3, back in Fog on the Barrow Downs. Now, why in the world would we talk about the Elendilmir in that context?
Yeah, I mean, so not too long ago, I think it was actually in the last episode.
That's right.
And we alluded to it in the episode before that too, I think. When we talked about the blade of Westernest that Merry used to help defeat the Witch King.
Right.
We talked about this chapter. But anyway, going back to it, basically right after Tom gave the hobbits those barrow blades and told them the history of them, he also talked about the men who were overcome by the evil king of Carndum in the land of Angmar. Few now remember them, Tom murmured. Yet still some go wandering, sons of forgotten kings walking in loneliness, guarding from evil things folk that are heedless.
Thank you for reading that like he did, by the way.
I tried.
Catch a little bit of Tom's trochaic tetrameter there.
We were talking, completely unrelated to this, we were talking about Tom Bombadil's meter earlier today.
Yes, we were.
And I really tried to do it like Tom.
Yep. Good job.
Thank you. So back to the text. The hobbits did not understand his words, but as he spoke, they had a vision, as it were, of a great expanse of years behind them, like a vast shadowy plain over which there strode shapes of men, tall and grim with bright swords. And last came one with a star on his brow.
With a star on his brow. Well, so obviously that's a vision a long time ago of Aragorn and him arriving with the Elendilmir. But now I want to go back to the disaster of the Gladden Fields. When we read that in Unfinished Tales, we discovered that the first Elendilmir, and yes, there are two, originally belonged to Silmarillion. Now, she was the daughter and the eldest child of Tar Elendil, who was the fourth king of Numenor. Now, back then, the throne went to the eldest son rather than the eldest child. That's something they changed later. But at her point, the scepter went to her brother. Now, she went on to marry a man from Andunier and have a son by the name of Valandil. He was the first of the lords of Andunier, a title that Tar Elendil gave him. The lords of Andunier were of the faithful, and it was from that line that Elendil, and therefore Isildur and eventually Aragorn, was descended.
And that's all well and good, but what does that have to do with the Elendilmir? Well, we're going to tell you. See, the Elendilmir, along with the Ring of Barahir, was handed down through her line for generation after generation. And in fact, it made it all the way to Isildur, who was wearing it at the disaster of the Gladden Fields. And there we read, Isildur turned west, and drawing up the ring that was hung in a wallet from a fine chain about his neck, he set it upon his finger with a cry of pain, and was never again seen by any eye upon Middle-earth. But the Elendilmir of the west could not be quenched, and suddenly it blazed forth red and wrathful as a burning star. Men and orcs gave way in fear, and Isildur, drawing a hood over his head, vanished into the night.
Now, we've referenced that passage before to support this notion that anything that gave off its own light would not be made invisible if you were wearing a One Ring, like the Phial of Galadriel. But for this story, what's important is what happens later to Isildur. There he rose up out of the water, only a mortal man, a small creature lost and abandoned in the wilds of Middle-earth. But to the night-eyed orcs that lurked there on the watch, he loomed up, a monstrous shadow of fear, with a piercing eye like a star. They loosed their poisoned arrows at it and fled. Needlessly, for Isildur, unarmed, was pierced through heart and throat, and without a cry, he fell back into the water. No trace of his body was ever found by elves or men. Heartbreaking.
Wow.
Yeah, he'd already lost the ring at that point, so it wasn't just the Elendilmir floating around with nothing. He was now visible because he was not wearing a ring, and he was lit up like a Christmas tree because of the Elendilmir.
That's right. And I'm reminded again just how beautiful that story is, and how much of a hero Isildur manages to become again before his death. And I mean, like, I know we've talked about that so many times, but it's such a wonderful story. If folks haven't read it, you really need to pick up Unfinished Tales and read it. Yeah. It's lovely.
Or come back in 2 years when we do the Unfinished Tales on the podcast.
There you go.
Because we'll talk about it then.
So later, we learned that elven smiths in Rivendell ended up making a replacement Elendilmir for Valandil. Now, Valandil was Isildur's son, and they wanted him to have, an Elendilmir to pass on of his own. Right. But we learned that it had not the ancientry nor potency of the one that had been lost when Isildur fled into the dark and came back no more. So it just didn't have what the original had. But, it was still a thing of beauty. It was a fillet of mithril with a white star of elvish crystal.
Right.
But that's not all, because later on, long after this battle is done, the battle we're talking about today, Battle of the Pelennor Fields, later on we read about King Elessar's reordering of his realm. And we learn that one of his first jobs was to restore Orthanc. Of course, Saruman's no longer in it. And he goes there to, clean the place up, redecorate.
Get it ready for some new tenants. Yeah.
Exactly. Put it back on the market.
It's an investment property.
Absolutely.
Just wants to make his mortgage back.
I mean, and he will. He totally will. In this market, in this neighborhood, absolutely.
Great views.
Yeah. Great views. I mean, now,
Well, yeah.
Because not too long ago, it was really lacking in curb appeal.
Absolutely it was, yeah.
He cleans it up. He brings in some gardeners, probably hobbits. Anyway.
Probably.
So Elessar goes and, his people restore Orthanc. And beyond jewels and heirlooms of Eorl, stolen by Wormtongue, we read, at last, behind a hidden door that they could not have found or opened had not Elessar had the aid of Gimli the dwarf, a steel closet was revealed. Maybe it had been intended to receive the ring, but it was almost bare. In a casket on a high shelf, 2 things were laid. One was a small case of gold attached to a fine chain. It was empty and bore no letter or token, but beyond all doubt it had once borne the ring about Isildur's neck.
Wow. But there's one other thing there. We read, next to it lay a treasure without price, long mourned as lost forever, the Elendilmir itself, the white star of elvish crystal upon a fillet of mithril that had descended from Silmarillion to Elendil, and had been taken by him as the token of royalty in the North Kingdom. Every king and the chieftains that followed them in Arnor had borne the Elendilmir down even to Elessar himself. But, and this is where we get the story of the replacement version, then Elessar took it up with reverence, and when he returned to the north and took up again the full kingship of Arnor, Arwen bounded upon his brow, and men were silent and amazed to see its splendor. But Elessar did not again imperil it, and wore it only on high days in the North Kingdom. Otherwise, when in kingly raiment, he bore the Elendilmir which had descended to him. And this also is a thing of reverence, he said, and above my worth, 40 heads have worn it before. So yeah, wow. Now he's got 2 heirlooms.
He's got 2 of them. He's got like a really valuable one, and then he's got like the prop one that he just wears, he just wears that one when he goes on Jimmy Kimmel.
That we are searching for the Elendilmir. I tell him, but I don't think he'll be very keen. He already
got one, you see.
All right. Well,
yeah.
I love that story. Yeah. So many little beautiful treasures like that in Unfinished Tales.
Yeah. And honestly, so many beautiful treasures in Middle Earth, aren't there?
Like, yes, there are.
It's amazing how much stuff, Tolkien writes about these artifacts and these things that have histories of their own and that just flesh out this world so much. Even something like the Elendilmir, which doesn't really appear that much.
No.
It has a couple of appearances in Lord of the Rings. It's really about it.
The coronation, and I think he's wearing this version of it, the replacement version, when he comes to the bridge at the Brandywine.
I think you're right. Yeah, because that wouldn't have been a high occasion, would it?
No.
But yeah, I mean, it's amazing how much like Tolkien every one of these artifacts has a history of its own. I mean, not every one, obviously there's some mysteries, but I just love that, this is all that stuff that gives that inner consistency of reality.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful.
Really,
so cool.
really is. I love it. I'm going to have you pick up exactly where I left off. This is one part of the chapter where we're not able to skip a whole lot.
And so at length, Éomer and Aragorn met in the midst of the battle, and they leaned on their swords and looked on one another and were glad. Thus we meet again, though all the hosts of Mordor lay between us, said Aragorn. Did I not say so at the Hornburg? So you spoke, said Éomer, but hope oft deceives, and I knew not then that you were a man foresighted. Yet twice blessed is help unlooked for, and never was a meeting of friends more joyful. And they clasped hand in hand. Nor indeed more timely, said Éomer. You come none too soon, my friend. Much loss and sorrow has befallen us. Then let us avenge it ere we speak of it, said Aragorn, and they rode back to battle together. Hard fighting and long labor they had still, for the Southrons were bold men and grim and fierce in despair, and the Easterlings were strong and war-hardened and asked for no quarter. And so in this place and that, by burned homestead or barn, upon hillock or mound, under wall or on field, still they gathered and rallied and fought until the day wore away. Then the sun went at last behind Mindalluin and filled all the sky with a great burning, so that the hills and the mountains were dyed as with blood. Fire glowed in the river, and the grass of the Pelennor lay red in the nightfall. And in that hour, the great battle of the field of Gondor was over, and not one living foe was left within the circuit of the Rammas. All were slain save those who fled to die or to drown in the red foam of the river. Few ever came eastward to Morgul or Mordor, and to the land of the Haradrim came only a tale from far off, a rumor of the wrath and terror of Gondor.
Good story. We want the Haradrim to be a little bit afraid.
Absolutely.
Oh, man, what a passage. What a moment. Aragorn and Éomer meeting up in the battle again, just as Aragorn had said. It's so beautiful.
Such a great friendship moment.
Yes. Yes.
I love it.
I do too. So they take a moment to rest after they meet, right? They're leaning on their swords. They're catching up. Just a couple of friends trying not to get killed.
Right.
I'm sure the action's not too fast and furious around them. They're really just glad to see one another still alive. I mean, Aragorn.
Absolutely.
I told you, man.
I told you we'd meet again. And Éomer admits, yeah, you said that, but I didn't really believe you.
No.
He says, I didn't know that you were foresighted back
Interesting.
then.
Interesting. Yeah.
But while I've kind of translated into vernacular English here, let's talk about the phrase Éomer actually uses. Hope oft deceives, he says.
Yes.
Let's talk
that's
about
an interesting one.
What kind of hope would deceive? What does he mean here? We've talked about different kinds of hope, right? There's Amdir hope, which is like, I hope I win the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Estel hope, which is hope that's founded on something, hope that's founded on belief and faith and knowledge. Tell me about this. What kind of hope do you think deceives? I guess
I've
maybe
got
Amdir,
to imagine.
Right?
Do you think the Rohirrim have multiple words for hope? I mean,
probably not.
That's the thing I'm thinking of is their hope is the way most people think of hope, which is, I hope the weather's nice tomorrow, or I hope I win the lottery, as opposed to having hope, having Estel. I think, and this isn't a criticism of Éomer whatsoever. This is just a recognition that he doesn't necessarily have the language to explain that his hope was of a more limited nature. Sure, he would have hoped to see Aragorn again, but he didn't think he would. He had no reason to think he would. You're going on the paths of the dead, man.
Right.
You're not going to make it out of there.
Well, and he had no knowledge to base that on. He had, that's what Estel is ultimately, is hope that's founded on something.
That's true. And Aragorn hadn't given him any information. It's not like Aragorn said, I'm the long lost king, and the prophecy says I can go through there and get the army to fight for me. Then maybe Éomer's like, oh, well, I have reason to hope. I mean, from his
either that or he's like, okay, sure, bro. Okay.
Yeah, whatever you say, man.
All right.
Yeah, let me just change I'm just going to delete his number from my phone. He's he's a little kooky now. Guy thinks he's a king, man.
Yeah. I think you're right, though. I think it's just Éomer just does not have the language to have multiple words for hope. And why would he? These are elvish concepts.
They are. And also think about what he's just experienced, right? I'm pretty sure he hoped that Theoden would make it through the battle and that he'd get back to meet Éowyn again.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then he just hopes maybe somebody's around to sing about him after he dies.
Yeah, it's a pretty small hope. Yeah,
right.
That's a good point. It's a very good point.
That's very interesting, though. But, again, because hope is such an important concept in Tolkien, I think it's I think it's important to think about this idea that, hope oft deceives. And I think it's true. It is that it's that hope that we just kind of base on nothing, the sort of blind hope.
Yeah, I don't think Estel's actually capable of deceit. Now, that doesn't mean that if you really have Estel, it'll happen. I'm not saying that at all. It's just not deceit. There's not any trickery going on. It's not its very nature. But Amdir, just regular old plain hope.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But he uses that phrase, hope oft deceives. He uses another aphorism here. Twice blessed is help unlooked for.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, you weren't expecting help and it comes, and twice blessed. Why? Because one is the blessing.
One, it's help.
It happened and help is good.
Yeah.
But then it's also blessed because, wow, you didn't expect it. You were pleasantly surprised.
In this case, I was expecting to die in the next 5 to 10 minutes, maybe 20.
And I'm pleasantly surprised that I'm still alive and my friend is here. Yeah.
That's it. Good news. Yay. Huzzah. Yeah.
And Éomer needs some good news today.
He does, man. He's been having a really crappy day. Yeah. So he then says, look, Aragorn, you have come just in time, right? Much loss and sorrow has come. And, obviously we know what he's talking about.
Yeah. And I love that moment because I always think, this is a very grim moment. There's some horrible things that have happened. And yet there is something just sort of light and bantery about the way he says this, oh, you come none too soon, my friend. There is something just kind of casual about this. And then he goes straight into much loss and sorrow has befallen us, which obviously is a very grim thought. I don't know. I kind of like the disconnect between those two sentences for me, because it just kind of feels like, Éomer is just kind of a roller coaster of emotions right now, which is what you'd expect.
Yeah, of course.
And so Aragorn, hearing this is like, okay, cool. I want to hear all about it, but first, let's fight. We got to prioritize this battle first. We got to avenge these losses first, and then we can talk about them and presumably mourn about them later on.
Exactly. It in a way, it really echoes what Éomer had said before as well. When he kind of put away that grief. War. He was talking about the death of Theoden, right? Later our women will weep. War calls us. We've got a job to do.
Right now we've got to fight.
Yeah. So they ride off together back to the battle. Question though, says they ride off back to the battle. Aragorn would not have been mounted when exiting the ship, so has he just grabbed a spare horse, or maybe he's climbed up on Éomer's horse together to create the single-unit cavalry of Doom +3?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I never noticed that.
It's
before.
just, I don't think I'd ever noticed it either, but this whole idea of they rode back to battle together. Well, on what? Did he bring his horse with him on the boat?
I can't imagine he did.
He might have, I suppose, but I don't think so, because the way he's described as coming off the ship sounds like he's very much on foot.
It does seem that way, yeah. He must have found a spare horse somewhere on the battlefield. Yeah. There've got to be spare horses, milling about. Although,
running hither, thither, and yon. Yeah. It's just one of those weird details that we've never noticed before.
And I'm thinking about, some of the stuff that Brett talked about like how horses are, they're fragile animals. They're not particularly brave in battle. I don't know. Would there be horses hanging around, or would they run off once their riders fall?
Well, they would ride off to a safe spot. So if they happen to be in a safe area,
it doesn't seem like they're in a safe area, though, does it? It seems like they're
stopping and having a conversation, a cup of coffee. I mean, they're not.
Well, that's a good point.
They're not like, "Hey, Éomer, hold on a second." Oh, what was that, buddy? They're standing there leaning on their swords. So
that's true. But
if you can lean, you can clean.
I guess just by virtue of the fact that they did ride back to battle, I guess we have to assume that he finds a horse. But
that's true.
It is interesting. But anyway, let's get back to the text here. This next paragraph that I read is fascinating to me,
isn't it?
Tolkien actually gives the men who serve Sauron, the Southrons and the Easterlings, he gives them a measure of dignity here, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. He describes the Southrons as bold men and grim and fierce in despair. The Easterlings are strong and war-hardened, and they don't ask for quarter. I mean, I don't think the orcs ask for quarter either, but we're never given that sort of description of the orcs.
Right. That's absolutely right. And Hammond and Scull actually make a similar observation. Of course, they say it better than we do. They say, Tolkien allows men who fought for Sauron the same ethos as those fighting on the side of Gondor. And they then point out that this lines up with Tolkien's own feelings about the Germans during World War II.
They may have been the enemy, but he was frustrated by the BBC spin that, quote, the German troops are a motley collection of sutlers, a sutler is a civilian provisioner, and broken men, while yet recording the bitterest defense against the finest and the best equipped armies that have ever taken the field.
I mean, I'm amused by the BBC's take on that, but I also really love that Tolkien is, he's got a more nuanced view. He recognizes that.
His letters to Christopher about the war are really fascinating in that regard.
They really are. They really are. And I love that Tolkien kind of sees that bias on behalf of the BBC and kind of condemns it. He actually goes on to talk about how distressing it is to see the press groveling in the gutter as low as Goebbels in his prime, shrieking that any German commander who holds out in a desperate situation is a drunkard and a besotted fanatic.
A besotted fanatic.
Just taking down the BBC's very biased view on the Germans, really awesome. And these quotes, by the way, are from letter number 81 that he wrote to Christopher in 1944.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, those letters to Christopher in that time span are very fascinating. So we see these forces fighting a losing battle, but they're fighting it nonetheless. And as the battle draws to its end, we see the day coming to its end. This has been a long, violent day. The sun is going down. The sky is filled with red.
That's right. And we're told that not a single enemy was left alive within the circle of the Ramas Echor.
Wow.
The only ones that were still alive actually fled to the river. Many of them drowned there, we're told, in the red foam of the river. The river is just like red with blood.
And we'll see that again in the song at the end of the chapter.
That's right. And we're told that very few ever returned home to where they came from.
Yeah.
And that, for the Haradrim at least, the wrath and terror of Gondor became a tale. This became something they talked about. This became history, probably something they told their children about the wrath and terror.
Let's not have a war with Gondor, please, because we lost all of our men. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Man.
All right. We've got one more passage here to wrap up the chapter, and I'm going to hand it over to you to start that.
All right. Aragorn and Éomer and Imrahil rode back towards the gate of the city, and they were now weary beyond joy or sorrow. These three were unscathed, for such was their fortune and the skill and might of their arms, and few indeed had dared to abide them or look on their faces in the hour of their wrath. But many others were hurt or maimed or dead upon the field. The axes hewed Forlong as he fought alone and unhorsed, and both Duilin of Morthond and his brother were trampled to death when they assailed the Mumakil, leading their bowmen close to shoot at the eyes of the monsters. Neither Hirluin the Fair would return to Pinathgelin, nor Grimbold to Grimslade, nor Halbarad to the Northlands, dour-handed ranger. No few had fallen, renowned or nameless, captain or soldier, for it was a great battle, and the full count of it no tale has told. So long afterward a maker in Rohan said in his song of the mounds of Mundburg, "We heard of the horns in the hills ringing, the swords shining in the south kingdom. Steeds went striding to the stoning land as wind in the morning war was kindled. There Theoden fell, Thengling mighty, to his golden halls and green pastures in the northern fields, never returning, high lord of the host.
Harding and Guzlaf, Dunher and Derwin, a doughty Grimbold, Herifaran, Herubrand, Horn and Fastred fought and fell there in a far country. In the mounds of Munburg and a mould they lie with their league fellows, lords of Gondor. Neither Hirluin the Fair to the hills by the sea, nor Forlong the Old to the flowering vales, ever to Arnach to his own country returned in triumph, nor the tall bowmen Derufin and Duilin to their dark waters, mirrors of Morthond on the mountain shadows. Death in the morning and at day's ending, lords took and lovely. Long now they sleep under grass in Gondor by the great river. Grey now as tears, gleaming silver red, then it rolled roaring water. Foam dyed with blood flamed at sunset. As beacons mountains burned at evening, red fell the dew in Rammasechor.
Wow. Red fell the dew at Rammasechor. That man could roll some R's,
I was going to say, you did a good job rolling your R's a little while ago. That man, though.
That is just unbelievable.
Whoever that fellow is.
Whoever that guy is, that's right.
Lovely.
Isn't it? Always a joy to have that very special guest reader. Folks, the J.R.R. Tolkien audio collection available through our library page.
Absolutely. Awesome stuff. And I have it in my phone. I just listen to it in the car sometimes just because I can.
Exactly.
So, all right. Going back to the beginning of the passage you read, we start with that incredible description of these three heroes, Aragorn, Éomer, and Imrahil, as you said it quite nicely.
Thank you.
And we're told that all three of them were unscathed, partly because of fate, partly due to their own skill with weapons, but also because few indeed had dared to abide them during the battle.
That's right.
Now, what does that mean? Let's talk a little bit about that.
That's right. Like Brett said, if you're a run-of-the-mill orc or just like Private Southron, you see a guy with clearly better armor and weapons and who's leading his men, you might just move on and take down that peasant with the pitchfork.
Yeah. Nobody's rushing to go take on these guys.
Still, it is another great way that Tolkien elevates these three, and I love that Imrahil is with them. It's the king of Gondor, the king of Rohan, and the prince of Dol Amroth, who has elven blood, like Aragorn does.
That's right, he does, absolutely. And yet, sadly, not everyone is as fortunate or as skilled or as well-armed or as intimidating as these three. There are a lot of people hurt, maimed, or dead, and we start to get a roll call, almost like an epic catalog, really, of the honored dead here, beginning with Forlong. Now, this was Forlong, the lord of Lasarnach, who was alone and on foot.
No, not a good
not
thing.
where a cavalryman wants to be.
Not at all. You were right, by the way, about this roll call. It makes me think a little bit of the way we got this same list when they showed up at the very beginning of the book in chapter 1 in Minas Tirith. But we do get some more on this list, right? We get Duilin and Derfuin. Derfuin doesn't get named here. It says Duilin and his brother. Poor guy. It's Derfuin. They're the sons of Duin here, who brought 500 bowmen from the uplands of Morthond, and they got trampled as they tried to shoot the eyes out of the Mumakil. Oh, wow. Just awful. And then, of course, there's Hirluin the Fair, the Green Hills from Pinath Gelin, he had led his force of 300 gallant green-clad men.
Yeah. We got some Rohirrim in here too. We've got Grimbold of Westfold. He was the leader of one of the first Eoreds through the wall. And that was the line, and Grimbold shall lead his towards the left. And we also have one of the Dunedain, right?
Yeah.
Halbarad, the Stern Ranger, is named here as well.
Oh, man. Breaking so many hearts. He had quite the death in Lotro. You know, I mean, we don't get any details on his death here, but in Lord of the Rings Online, it's
oh, really?
Very sad.
Cool.
We'll just leave it there. But of course, we all know how Brad dies because we read the book.
Right.
No few had fallen. And the text points out that the dead run the spectrum from, the common nameless soldiers who, of course, they're not actually nameless. I know the text says that, but come on, these people have names. They just don't have names in the history. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. To the renowned captains, like the ones we just saw named.
Right.
Poor guys. Yeah. Red shirt number 7. And
yeah,
I'm just soldier guy. Yeah.
They all look like Temuera Morrison underneath their helmets.
Well played. So, then we get that Rohirric song, The Mounds of Munburg, this elegy, don't we?
Yeah, we do. And I love obviously, this poem that we're going to get, this elegy, as you call it, is alliterative because it is a Rohirric song, as you said.
Right.
But I love that there's actually some alliteration in the paragraph above it, right? We're told no few had fallen. I just noticed that. No, we're not told many had fallen. We're told no few had fallen, so that we can get the alliteration. We get a maker had said in his song of the Mounds of Munburg.
Mm-hmm. Not a poet. Yeah.
Yeah, a maker. I love that. It's so cool. So, of course, it is called Munburg because this is a song written by a Rohirric poet. Right. Munburg is basically Old English for a sheltering hill. That comes from Parma Elder Lambron 17. But there's actually some other possible meanings of this word. So like burg can also mean fortress or castle or walled town. Mund can mean protection or guardianship. And if you think about it like that, if you think about it like, let's say fortress of guardianship, that makes Munburg almost a calque, almost a word for word translation of Minas Tirith, which is Tower of Guard. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
Now let's take a look at some of the other names and the meanings of these names that we get in this poem. Stoning Land. I love that because that's another calque. That's another
calque,
word for word translation of Gondor. Gondor means stone land in Sindarin. And that's exactly what we get here in Stoning Land.
That's right.
We get Theoden referred to as Thangling Mighty. Thangling just means a son of Thengel. We've got a warrior named Harding who has fallen. His name basically just means hard one. Then we get Dunhera. His name means hill warrior. That comes from Dun, which means hill, and Hera, which means army or host, but can also mean just a single warrior. Daer means bold or brave, and Wina means friend.
Right. We also have Herafara, which means traveling warrior. You've already talked about Hera, which means army or host, but can also mean individual warrior. Fara meaning farer or traveler. We also get Herubrand, which almost sounds like the same prefix, Hera, but it's Heru. And Heru is sword. And then brand is firebrand or torch. Though interestingly, brand is sometimes used as a metaphor for sword, like in Erkenbrand's name. So this could also be sword, which I like.
Yeah, I like that.
He wields two-handed, right?
Yeah.
But didn't do him any good, but yeah. Then we get Fastred. Fastred means firm counsel. Fast is firm or solid, and red means counsel or advice. So
right. Okay. Awesome. And what I love about this, we've gone through a whole bunch of Rohirric names here, but it's important to note that actually both the Rohirric dead and the Gondorian dead are both honored in this song. And I really love that because this is a song written by a Rohirric poet. You might expect him to just talk about the Rohirric warriors. That's probably who, the poet is singing to their descendants or their family members. Maybe they would just talk about them. But no, he talks about both, doesn't he?
He does. I mean, sure, we start with the men of Rohan, but it could reasonably be argued that one would have to lead with a king. I mean, he's the most important person in this list, Rohirric names or Gondorian names. And so you finish then with the rest of the Rohirric names. But yeah, we do get the Gondorian names
and
too.
That does make sense. You might start with the king, then the Rohirrim, because they're the closest in proximity to him, and then the Gondorians after that. It is interesting that for the Gondorian names, we actually get the places they're from too, don't we?
I love that.
And I mean, I wonder why that is. Is that maybe because maybe these names are not as familiar to Rohirric listeners?
Right. That's the thing. Who's going to listen to this song? This song is going to be going back to Rohan. And so we're trying to give a little bit of an understanding to the Rohirric listeners of who these people are that died and the faraway places that they're from. Yeah.
Right. That's awesome.
And then, that ending, right? I mean, that the alliteration, the way Tolkien read that, the way he just nails those R's.
He does.
Red.
Yeah.
I mean, whoa.
Nobody recites his own poetry like Tolkien himself.
Yeah. No, I will always try to get at least a stanza in from him in any of the works. Yeah. Well, there is a line in that song of the Mounds of Munburg that I think the professor skipped. Nor Barlaam the slow to the pony ever, to Bree to his own pub returned with the mail. What does Barlaam have in the mail back for us tonight, Shawn?
I'll give you an E for effort on that one.
Thank you. That's about all I expect to get. Yeah.
All right. Well, we do have a couple of questions, and actually we've got a couple of questions related to the Dead Men of Dunharrow tonight. Not because they actually make an appearance here in the book, but because so many people either think this is when they do their thing, thanks to the films, or we just kind of have this correlation in our brains now, thanks to the films.
Yeah, I think so.
Now, the first question comes to us from Mina L., who wrote in recently to ask, I have a question about the Oathbreakers, which may be fitting to answer when they come up again in the Minas Tirith flashback. Can the Dead Men of Dunharrow interact with the physical world? In episode 270, Alan and Don concluded that the Dead Men of Dunharrow are disembodied spirits, or Fear without Hroar. They were contrasted with Ar-Pharazôn and his host, buried under the caves of the Forgotten, who were left alive in an ironic immortality until the last battle.
Ironic immortality, I love that.
I love that, yeah.
Yeah.
That's going all the way back to the Akalabath in season 1.
Yeah.
Now, as disembodied spirits, Mina says, I would expect that the Oathbreakers cannot interact with the physical world, that they cannot cause physical harm. This is supported by the fact that in the battle for Pelargir, nowhere do we read that the dead men fought in the traditional sense. Their weapon is one of fear. Is this because they could not interact with the physical world, or because they did not have to? Personally, Mina says, I always favored the former, that they could not interact, until hearing episode 272 and the fate of Baldur, son of Brego, whose body was found by the Grey Company along the paths of the dead. This seems to argue in favor of an ability to physically interact with the world around them and to inflict physical pain. Wow, what a question, Mina.
Isn't it? It's a great question.
I love this. Yeah.
It's great. And I love the ironic immortality bit. That is so good and is so
wonderful
rich.
Turn of phrase. Yeah.
Just a beautiful phrase. So it's a good question, Mina. I think, like you said, they do appear to be, for all intents and purposes, what we would call ghosts, right? Disembodied spirits, like Don and I talked about, Fear without their Hroar. But that doesn't really answer the question that you're asking about their ability to interact with the physical world. So we need to look at the text. Yes, it is true. Like you said, when they helped take Pelargir, they didn't use their weapons. Let's go ahead and take a look at that text. Gimli here is telling the story, and he says, But Aragorn halted and cried with a great voice, Now come, by the black stone I call you. And suddenly the shadow host that had hung back at the last came up like a gray tide, sweeping all away before it. Faint cries I heard, and dim horns blowing, and a murmur as of countless far voices. It was like the echo of some forgotten battle in the dark years, long ago. Pale swords were drawn, but I know not whether their blades would still bite, for the dead needed no longer any weapon but fear. None would withstand them. Okay.
All right. Thank you for that, Gimli.
That was my weird Gimli, but I started, I couldn't stop him. Like, yeah, well,
No,
whatever.
it's
He doesn't
fine.
have his accent anymore. He's just deep and gravelly.
It was good. Okay, so the dead men apparently didn't need the weapons thanks to the aura of fear that they created. Let's figure that's like, what, maybe 100-yard area of effect, wisdom save, disadvantage on the roll.
Easily.
But does that necessarily mean that their weapons could not bite?
Right.
What's this bit about Baldur and his body? You want to...
Yeah, I think that's the thing. And Mina says she always favored the former, that they couldn't interact. I think what she references here, and I'm going to read that now, suggests that indeed they can. In that episode, we talked about a footnote in the Rivers and Beacon Hills of Gondor that I'd found in The Nature of Middle-earth, though it had originally been published in Vinyard Tengwar 42. There, Tolkien writes, "The special horror of the closed door before which the skeleton of Baldur was found was probably due to the fact that the door was the entrance to an evil temple hall to which Baldur had come, probably without opposition up to that point. But the door was shut in his face, and enemies that had followed him silently came up and broke his legs and left him to die in the darkness, unable to find any way out."
Yeah. Well, so the ghosts came up behind him and broke his legs.
Yeah. Cruel. They didn't kill him. I mean, if they could break his legs, they could have broken his neck. They just broke his legs. Yeah.
Right. No, they broke his legs, so he's stuck there until he dies from either madness or thirst, whichever one comes first.
Oh my goodness, that is terrifying stuff, really. Yeah.
That's ugly.
Isn't it? They are nasty mean. Yeah. But, there is one more quote, because I thought, I don't want to hang my hat that they can interact with the world on that one quote, because, and I have seen this argument, but the timeline doesn't work. Oh, well, what if those were actual bodied enemies? What if those were actual alive people? Well, that doesn't work with the timeline. There's no way that the predecessors, that the Oathbreakers were still physically there when Baldur was in there. So that doesn't work. But let's say, just for argument's sake, that they lived forever and those are actual alive people. I don't believe that. But there's another quote that suggests the dead in Tolkien's world might still have an ability to interact with the physical world. And it comes from chapter 18 in the Silmarillion. That's of the ruin of Beleriand and the fall of Fingolfin. This is also creepy. After the death of Fingolfin, the narrative takes us to Barahir, and we read this. "Then Morgoth pursued his people to the death until few remained, and all the forest of the northward slopes of that land was turned little by little into a region of such dread and dark enchantment that even the orcs would not enter it unless need drove them. And it was called Delduoth and Taurnufuin, the forest under nightshade. The trees that grew there after the burning were black and grim, and their roots were tangled, groping in the dark like claws, and those who strayed among them became lost and blind, and were strangled or pursued to madness by phantoms of terror." Strangled by phantoms of terror. So, yeah, wow. I think the dead men could.
Actually strangled by phantoms, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the dead men could have physically slain their enemies, just they really never needed to because they couldn't get close to their enemies. Their enemies ran away before they could get there. Yeah.
I think you're right. It really does seem like disembodied spirits could physically interact with the living. And so they could have physically slain their enemies if they needed to. But like you said, I mean, they wouldn't need to unless maybe they came face to face with something scarier than them, like the ring wraiths or something.
Well, that's going to be trouble anyway. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, but you're right. I think any mortal foe is going to be terrified by them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's worth a reminder to listeners that, like you said at the beginning, and like Mina said, these are disembodied spirits. These are Fëanor without Hroar. Yeah. So that makes them very different from other types of undead we've seen. They're very different from the Barrow-wights, which were evil spirits sent by the Witch King to reanimate dead bodies.
Right.
Obviously, we know they interacted with the physical world,
but they're in a physical body. It may not be a living body, but it's a physical body. Yeah.
Right. Or something like the faces in the Dead Marshes, where we talked about, they were just apparitions. Yeah. And maybe they weren't even real. Maybe they were just illusions. And we know they didn't interact with the physical world. But
nope.
But these are truly something different. And so I kind of like that we've kind of delved into this a little bit and seen what makes them different. But really I definitely agree with where you've landed. I think that's really, I think that's got to be it.
Yep.
Do we have time for one more?
We do this time, yeah. In another Dead Man related question, Casey J asks, I was recently finding myself fixated on oaths in the Legendarium. I understand that those who break oaths are often punished in some way, for example, the Army of the Dead. But what would happen to someone who swore an oath but was unable to keep it? Is there some sort of Middle-earth loophole?
Interesting. That's interesting. I mean, I think it's worth starting from, like, let's just recognize that oaths in Tolkien's writing are serious business. I mean,
very serious
business. These are not, oaths are not taken lightly. When you stop to think that one of the handful of times that Iluvatar intervened after the creation of Arda was actually to enforce an oath.
That's true.
They're big. They're important.
They're big. Yeah.
They are a crucial part of Tolkien's sub-created world. I'm thinking about it, and I've been thinking about it for a few days as we've been preparing for this episode. I can't think of a single instance in which an oathbreaker actually got out of an oath just because they were unable to keep it.
Somehow it becomes impossible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The closest one that comes to mind really is the biggest one. It's Feanor's oath, right? After he made it back to Middle-earth, he was mortally wounded by Gothmog. His sons are carrying him back towards Mithrim. And then we read, "But as they drew near to Aethel-Sirion and were upon the upward path to the pass over the mountains, Feanor bade them halt, for his wounds were mortal, and he knew that his hour was come. And looking out from the slopes of Ered Wethrin, with his last sight, he beheld far off the peaks of Thangorodrim, mightiest of the towers of Middle-earth, and knew with the foreknowledge of death that no power of the Noldor would ever overthrow them. But he cursed the name of Morgoth thrice and laid it upon his sons to hold to their oath. I'm just going to put brackets anyway, and to avenge their father," end quote. He knew it was going to be impossible for his sons to keep their oath, but he held them to it anyway. I mean,
Feanor. I mean, it's like that moment of death, looking up at Thangorodrim and like, oh, I see. Yeah. This was really stupid.
Yeah.
But avenge me. Do it. Yeah. I'm like, no.
Oh my goodness. It really was impossible.
He knew it was impossible, and it was impossible. And we see, as the way the story plays out, that it's impossible.
Yeah.
And after the War of Wrath, when the two remaining Silmarils are regained, Maglor and Maedhros, which are the only two sons of Feanor left at the time, they're actually getting ready to do the impossible, and they engage in some, well, what does the oath really say? There's actually like a discussion between them. They're kind of doing a little bit of mental gymnastics and trying to avoid doing what the oath requires them to do, in which they actually know that they're sworn to do. And Maglor actually argues, the oath says not that we may not bide our time.
I love that. I'm
Let's just hang on. There's
no time limit on this. Right. Yeah, we're immortal, so we can just keep on waiting.
Yeah, there's no delivery date here, so let's just hold off. And it may be that in Valinor all shall be forgiven and forgot, and we shall come into our own in peace. I mean, it's a nice try.
You gotta love the thought. Yeah,
you gotta love the effort, and let's just wait long enough and people forget. What's the statute of limitations on an unbreakable oath? But I mean, really, that what we can gain from that is that even if an oath is unable to be kept, you're not getting out of it. I mean, you might try to lawyer your way out of it.
Hey, now.
I'm sorry. No offense meant.
I haven't been a lawyer in a couple decades. It's all right with me. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, oaths are so serious. You don't take them if it's going to be impossible, and too bad if it becomes impossible.
You should have thought about that before you swore the oath.
Before you swore the oath. Absolutely. Yep. Think, man. Don't swear an oath unless you really want to swear that oath. Yeah.
Right.
All right.
Man. And by the way, if you have sworn an oath and it proves to be impossible and you realize this as you lie dying, don't compel your sons to hold to the oath for you.
Please be better than Feanor. As a
I died doing this. Better. I died doing this, so I want all 7 of my sons to do the same. Great parenting, Feanor.
Great parenting. I love the way you started that phrase, though. If you have sworn an oath, and it started to sound like a medical, like a pharmaceutical thing.
If you have sworn an oath lasting more than 2 centuries.
Exactly. Yeah. Or maybe one of those ads you see on TV where it's a lawyer referral service. If you've sworn an oath, you may be entitled to compensation.
If you've sworn an oath,
888
or your father has sworn an oath,
is just a referral service. We bear no responsipency for the lawyers.
You may be entitled to compensation. Contact 1-800-VALINOR. And all shall be forgiven and forgot. You shall come into your own in peace.
That's right. We've negotiated many oath breakings before. We negotiate with Iluvatar all the time.
Yep.
Oh man. Oh, good stuff. Well, folks, that does wrap it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. But come back again next week when New Betta Do Betta from TikTok and from Signum University, I might add, joins me for the Pyre of Denethor. But before we go, I want to thank you, Shawn, for coming back one more time. I have enjoyed working with some incredible co-hosts this season. It is true, but it is really, really great to have you back, even if it's just for a time. The door's open anytime, my friend.
I do. Thank you, Alan. It has been awesome being back. This is, as I've said so many times, this is my absolute favorite chapter in The Lord of the Rings. So glad that I could be back for it. And I'll be back again. I think we both know that. So, thank you. And I'll come back as soon as I can.
Excellent.
But for now, folks, Alan and I want to thank the members of Team PPP. Editor Jordan Rennells, our Barlaman Becca Davis, social media manager Casey Hilsey, event and Patreon community coordinator Katie McKenna, graphic artist Megan Collins, and website guru Phil Dean.
And speaking of the website, please be sure to give us a visit there at theprancingponypodcast.com. We've got show notes, hilarious outtakes, Prancing Pony ponderings, and our online storefront where you can get all sorts of PPP merch, including new chapter designs for this book from Megan. We've got some spectacular stuff there.
And you're also going to want to visit the library page. The Prancing Pony Podcast is, first and foremost, a podcast about the books. So if you're interested in a book we've mentioned on the show, you'll find a link for it in the library. And the PPP gets a small amount of compensation when you make your purchase, and we thank you for that.
Indeed, we do. We also want to thank our patrons at the Kierdance contribution tier. I'll start with DeMay in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Jerry in Texas, Joseph in Michigan, Kathy from North Carolina, Lori from Washington, Carlos in California, Brian in the UK, Ned from Connecticut, Jerry from Washington, Joe in Washington, Erwin from the Netherlands, and Dylan in Australia.
And there's also Ben in Minnesota, Anthony in Texas, Karen in the UK, Zaksu in Illinois, Brian in Texas, Sarah in New Jersey, June in Ireland, Joshua in Massachusetts, Lucy in Texas, Connor in North Carolina, Keith in Alabama, Erica in Texas, Carson in Oklahoma, Vivienne in California, James in Massachusetts, Anne in Kentucky, Roger in Michigan, Shawn in New Jersey, and Mason in California. Thank you all so very much for your support.
Indeed, thank you very much.
And folks, make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe now through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, your lines to the Song of the Mounds of Munburg to honor Halbarad the Ranger to Barlaman at theprancingponypodcast.com. And if you want your voice literally heard, just send us audio of your question. Visit podinbox.com/prancingponypod and record your question for us.
Just please be sure to still email the question to Barlaman. Even though Barlaman's been a lot more reliable lately, there is still a lot of mail to sort through. But we'll try to get to you just as soon as we're able.
As always, though, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners and another excellent but admirable co-host. But until next time,
farewell, friends.